We've been discussing this, in fact, since 1992. Finally, we've rolled it out, but as the finance minister recently confessed, funding has always been a challenge. With 3 days to the budget, this is just the right time to have this conversation about sustainable funding options. And so wherever you are this morning, listening or watching, we'll be having a conversation that affects lives once more. Financing free quality education in Ghana, sustainable funding options. We are live this morning on Joy 99.7 FM. We're also live on the JoyNews channel on Multi TV. My name is Evans Mensah. We'll start with the opening prayer. I don't know why, but they asked me to pray, and I told them you don't want blessings. But they insisted. And so I will pray. And I expect that, don't expect much. Because it's been a while since this morning I woke up, I did my own personal prayer, and I've been asked to do one for everybody else, and so I will. So if you don't mind, ladies and gentlemen, may I ask you to please be upstanding. Lord God Almighty, we thank you for this morning. We thank you for another opportunity to meet. We thank you this morning that you've brought us together here for a worthy purpose. In this series, you've been with us. And this morning, we expect again that by your grace, you'll be with us again. We pray, O Lord, that you usher our steps, that today's event will be fruitful. That, of course, as our children go to school, we will come up with things that you yourself has inspired to make free education not only possible, but sustainable. In Jesus' name have we prayed with thanksgiving. Amen. I will now invite brief comments from the organizers of today's program, and they've been doing this for a long time. Nana Kwekude, who obviously is a good friend of mine, would give us brief opening remarks and set us off on our way. Ladies and gentlemen, please let's, with a hand of applause, let's welcome Nana Kwekude.
Thank you, Evans. Honorable Deputy Minister of Education, panel members, distinguished invited guests, ladies and gentlemen, I thank you for your response to our invitation and welcome you to the Graphic Business Stanbic breakfast meeting. As we all know, the education of our children is a core value in developing the human resource base of any country. It does not only benefit the children, but also families, communities, and the nation as a whole. And that is why all countries spend a chunk of their budget on education. Walter Elias Disney, co-founder of Walt Disney Production, said, and I quote, "Our greatest national resource is the minds of our children, and I believe," end quote, sorry, "and I believe it is in recognition of this that the government took the bold decision to invest in the provision of free senior high school for the children of this country, and to make high school education accessible to those who qualify to do so. Despite the teething challenges, we believe it is a worthwhile venture that the government must pursue to its logical conclusion, because the dividends of good investment in education will always be phenomenal. Today's meeting, therefore, We'll try to explore the various funding options available to the country towards the provision and sustenance of free quality education in Ghana. Graphic Business and Stanbic Bank have put this meeting together so we can have a more focused national discussion on the alternative means of funding available for the sustenance of this policy. I believe our eminent members will lead us to understand the possible ways to make the free education policy a success without compromising quality. Once again, I thank Stanbic Bank for supporting Graphic for this endeavor. But before I take my seat, let me end by quoting Nelson Mandela on the power of education. He said, and I quote, "Education is the most powerful weapon which you can use to change the world," and indeed Ghana. Once again, you are welcome and thank you very much.
A big round of applause for Nana, please. And I want to quickly acknowledge all those who've made this possible. Obviously, Graphic Business and Stanbic Bank, but Labadi Beach Hotel as well, Joy Business, JoyNews, and don't forget the Graphic News app. You can download it right now. I want to now invite from Stanbic, Kwame Sumeni, who is Head Corporate and Investment Banking. Another round of applause for Mr. Kwame Sumeni.
Good morning once again. I'm pleased to welcome you to the second Graphic Stanbic Business Forum. And I also bring you warm greetings from the board, the management, and staff of the bank. I'd like to acknowledge the presence of our board chairman, Professor Ernest Aite. Prof, good morning. Today's forum provides a platform for experts in the field of business and education to contribute their knowledge, experiences, and lessons learned in financing education in Ghana. Stanbic Bank remains committed to the task of promoting a culture of thought leadership in Ghana. And this latest series on financing of education is very much aligned to this goal of ours. We understand that government has been grappling with low revenue mobilization to finance its development agenda. At the same time, we're witnessing an increasing rate of enrollment across all public institutions. These trends underscore the need for the pursuit of a sustainable approach in the financing of education in Ghana. Our sincere thanks goes to our distinguished panelists for agreeing to lead the discussions today. We hope as well that these worrying trends in the educational sector will spur us to translate our discussions into tangible commitments and effective actions. Finally, I'd like to thank our co-sponsors and co-hosts, Graphic Communications Group, the Multimedia Group, and Labadi Beach Hotel for their tireless efforts in organizing this forum. I wish you all an engaging and successful event. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much. Can we please have that address, please? As we wait for that to be addressed, if you haven't had your breakfast yet, please make sure you do so. I can see the buffet there. I haven't had mine. I'm hoping that it doesn't get finished by the time this is done. I'll have mine post the event. And so please don't finish it. I'm sure there's enough for everybody and more. So yes. have breakfast at my expense. Great. I'm still hoping that this will be fixed. So, because the next individual I'm about to introduce, I don't want any interference in what he's about to say. So, kindly address it for me. Thank you. Now, I have a privilege of inviting a man who I consider my personal favorite in the list of appointees made by His Excellency the President, for many reasons.
I'm glad this is being done under the auspices of Stanbic and other corporate heads are here. What is the purpose of education when we talk about building the skills of our students and we are not involved in business? The eventual recipients of the very products that we claim to mold and train. When I came to the Ministry of Education, we had a meeting with, I think, the corporations in the companies in the cocoa industry. And what happened there kind of changed and actually emboldened me to do more. These companies were there to hear us so that they would know how to support us. And one of the middle-level staff that we went there with, who did the whole the organization of the event and did the presentation, made a comment. He said, we like the fact that you companies are coming here to help us. But when you come to the Ministry of Education, please do not tell us what to do. And I said, you stop right there. They should rather be telling us what to do. Because after you train all the students, they are the ones who are supposed to hire them. And you are telling them not to tell you what to do. So they will not also tell you whether they will hire your products or they are not hiring your products. Sometimes we talk about graduate unemployment and all the other things. And there are times, I'm also an entrepreneur, there are times when you interview people and you don't feel like hiring any one of them. So education has work to do. If we turn out the kind of graduates with the requisite skills who did not just memorize to get excellent grades, I'm sure we'll reduce graduate unemployment because the companies will be so enticed to hire more. So I'm glad that Stanbic is part of this program, and I hope more companies will come on board and help us dialogue as to the way forward in terms of education. And having said this, somebody may ask, what are the proper aims of education? Because invariably, we hear one thing and we have to do so many other things. Is it about preserving the harmony of civic life? Is it about providing opportunities for individuals to grow? Is it about improving artistic creativity? Is it about enhancing our scientific progress? Is it about empowering individuals to choose wisely? Is it about preparing citizens to enter the labor force? And the answer, of course, is all the above. We have to do all the above. And doing all the above means we have to create a robust education system that responds to the needs of our country in all these spheres. So it's not just about making sure that there's some civic education, but it's about doing more than that. And at the same time, making sure that the fullest potential of every child in this country is realized. About a week ago, exactly a week ago, the World Bank launched its Human Capital Index, and it was very insightful. To say the least, I was not impressed. We may quibble with maybe the way they came up with the data and other things, but at the end of the day, we saw that we have a long way to go. But the good news is that we have realized that there's a lot to be done. And that's why sometimes I say that in spite of our best efforts, we have not created an efficient system, or what we can really call a system of education. And sometimes quoted out of context, but I believe strongly that there's a lot that needs to be done. You see, sometimes we have this patchwork of arrangements, and we call it a system. When we change from the old middle school that helped some of us from the rural areas into this JHS program that was 9 years and it was across the board for everyone, those who came from homes and backgrounds that was used to going up to primary 6 and then going to high school probably did not see any huge change. But if you go to the rural areas, for somebody like me, how was I able to compete in senior high school? I went there, I was more mature. I could compete with those who went to the international schools because it took me 3 years more. And when I went in, I could compete with my maturity. The moment you said that everybody should have the same number of years, then you don't leave out the equity component that says if this area happens to be rural and poor, they need more government support and not less. Where we took our 633 model from, and if you look at the United States of America, where everybody goes to up to junior high school for the same number of years, communities that are poor get more government support. Then you look at our system. If you happen to go to Achimota, you get all the resources. And who are the ones who are able to go? But if you happen to go to my school, Jache Pramso, you are the short end of the stick. You have limited facilities. You have the most inexperienced teachers teaching you. And these are communities that are educating the poor among the poor, the poorest among the poor. And these are the ones where there are no equity, no intervention, so that they can lift up those who are poor and help them break the cycle of poverty. So, as we look at the need for quality education, and I know there are a number of people who complain that because of the free senior high school, students with aggregate 30 are being sent to Presec and are being sent to Achimota, and people are angry. All students call, they are angry. Why should you send a student with aggregate 30 to my famous school? And I said to them, why not? If Presec happens to be, or any other school for that matter, the top 55 schools, they happen to have the best rate of resources. They have well-trained teachers, more experienced. They are better equipped to deal with students who are low-performing than the schools that are struggling. So when you talk about access, you talk about quality, you cannot forget about equity. And for the last 2 years, the Minister of Education has done something unique under the direction of the minister, which required that all our Category A schools, about 55 of them, reserve 30% of their seats to children who went to public schools, who are more likely to be poor and disadvantaged. And a friend of mine who has a daughter at Wesley Girls Senior High School, they just came from a PTA meeting, and he said, this time around, there were so many parking spaces for parents to park their cars. And I said, why? He said, 30% of the parents were not driving. So you see, the place has been decongested for those of us who were driving their cars there. And he was so happy that he didn't have to struggle. But he's telling us something. The poor is now with us. The disadvantaged has found a way. We have given them an opportunity to be among those of us who are educated and elite. And the culture has changed. The diverse environment that has been created will inure to the benefits of our children, even more than the benefits of the children who are coming from these backgrounds. Free Senior High School and its cousin, Double Track, are here with us. Today, the first group of gold track students are reporting to school. I know there have been questions about why we ration. About a year ago, we had a meeting at the Ministry of Education, and South Korean Exim Bank executives and other senior higher education experts were there. And they had come to Ghana to give us a loan to build the Eastern campus of the Eastern University. And they met us in the Ministry of Education. The minister was not there, happened to chair the meeting. And they showed us some graphs as part of their presentation. And we're all ears because, hey, they are there to give us money. The first graph was about per capita income of South Korea and Ghana in 1960. And of course, we know the story of how our per capita income was higher. Then they showed us the per capita income now, South Korea, Ghana, way ahead of us. And they asked us, why do you guys think we've performed better than you? And of course, we're scratching our heads in shame. And they said, let's see the third graph. Third graph was the gross tertiary enrollment ratio of Ghana, South Korea compared. That is, if you look at the youth between the ages of 18 and 23, and you want to find out how many of them are in some kind of tertiary education. In Ghana, our average was 17%. Actually 16 point something, but I've rounded it up to 17%. And South Korea is 93.6. So they asked us, this is why we are ahead of you, and this is why we came here to give you a loan. And I vowed to myself when I left that meeting that yes, 60 years they've come to give us a loan, and I don't want them to come and give the loans to my grandchildren another 60 years from now. Yes, there are essential elements of the education system that we don't have, but we need to do a better job than what we have done. And of course, Ghana finds itself in a unique situation where we look at ourselves and we are the best kid on the block. Because when we talk about the gross tertiary enrollment of 17%, the African average is 7%. So we are more likely to look at ourselves and say we are better off than them. When I had a meeting where USAID's education director said Ghana would be the powerhouse for education in Africa, and when it was my turn to speak, I said, no, we are not going to be the powerhouse for education in Africa. We have to be the powerhouse of education for education in the world, not Africa. When you box yourself into the African syndrome, you are not going to move up. And I want us, together with our partners in business, find a way to get ourselves out of this. And of course, doing all this means you have to reform your education system. When you look at assessment, for example, the first time we get any data on student assessment in Ghana, formal one will be after 11 years of education, which is BEC. And others are just pilot assessment, the NEA and the EGRA and the EGMA. So after 11 years, what do you do with that data? It's too late for you to do serious intervention for the students. So at the Ministry of Education, as part of our curricular reforms, we are also looking at establishing a national assessment. So the students in primary 2, nation 1 will be assessed in English and mathematics, primary 4, primary 6, so that you have a time to really look at what is going on at Chebidi Primary School and be able to know whether the school is doing well or not and what we can do to turn it around. So we have then to begin to look at intervention, and we run away from this chew poor, pass and forget syndrome, which I call it chew poor, fail and forget, because the vast majority of students don't pass on the WASI. When they memorize, they don't. So we have to move away from it and have students seated in classrooms just like we're seated here, and have them dialogue with their peers and begin to look at a 21st century way of educating our children with peer collaboration, critical thinking taking place in the classroom, because students can voice their opinions. I've done some unannounced visits to schools. I go into the classroom, I talk to students, and they're excited even to hear about my background and what I've done in America, and since the case, every one of them wants to go to America anyway. So they get excited when they know that, oh, you build schools in America, wow. Everything I say, they will punctuate it with wow. And after I finish, I ask them, any questions? No hand is up. No hand. And that is when I see that there's something wrong. So as we look at sustainable ways of funding education, I also will venture to say that the best way of funding education is to fund it on things that are critical, on things that can really improve the learning culture in the schools after you guarantee access, and make sure that the very people that you are educating are the ones who are going to help improve the economy in such a way that you not then begin to worry too much about funding for education, because the innovative ways of doing things and the creativity they bring to the fore to improve productivity in industry is what will improve our economy. And when the economy improves, 4% is a lot of money. 4% of the GDP becomes a lot of money. When the economy improves, 5% of GDP becomes a lot of money. And then you're able to really look at how do you develop your education system, how do you sustain it. So I just want to say this. Our politicians are paid to talk, so sometimes I have to remind myself that I may be talking too much. And I just want to say that I'm very happy to be here this morning, and I hope the panelists, eminent educationists who are here will help us come up with various ideas as to how we fund free quality secondary education and free quality basic education and beyond. Because at this point, we don't have a choice. And the only choice we have is to make sure that our children are in school, and when they go to school, somebody has to pay for it. And I hope that through this dialogue, I will begin to look at ways where private sector involvement becomes important, voluntary contributions become important, our community participation become key in ensuring that this funding regime becomes sustainable, and the children of this nation, whether poor or rich, gets the opportunity for quality education. Thank you for the opportunity this morning.
A bigger round of applause for Dr. Duchum. A bigger round of applause for him. And he says it the way it should be said. So it's time to now get into the details of why we're here. Now, Dr. Duchum and the Education Ministry and government is spending 453 million cedis this year on the free senior high school policy. That's 500 million cedis. That is twice as much as they spent the year before. Now, this is the trick. In 2019, they're going to have all the 3 streams in school for the very first time. And so just imagine the ripple effect it has on the amount I just mentioned. When they started with just 1 stream, you're talking about in the region of 198, that's 200 million Ghana cedis. And then second stream, 500 million, thereabout. And then you have all the streams on. You're feeding them, you're putting them in school, some in boarding house. I don't know what the estimates are, but scary amounts that this government will have to deal with. And this is just 3 days to the budget, and so you can begin to imagine what the finance minister is going through, trying to balance the books and still pay for the bill as far as our kids going to free senior high school is concerned. That is why this conversation is important. And the fundamental question is, just having said what I just said, looking at what is going to happen in 2019 when all the 3 streams come on board, is this really sustainable, or should we cut back, as the other side has suggested, in rolling it out? This government says that is not an option. If it's not an option, then funding has to be sustainable. And we have the people who can help us break this down and propose some options in making the funding of the free senior high school policy sustainable. And so, ladies and gentlemen, I want to quickly invite my panel members to join me as we begin to dissect this. And later on, I'll invite you to also contribute, because this is a big conversation that must be had as we approach 2019, the year when, in fact, we're going to put in a lot of money into this. I want to first invite a good friend of mine, Director General of the Ghana Education Service, Professor Poku Amankwa. Prof, thank you very much for coming. A round of applause for him as he makes his way up here. Prof, thank you very much for coming. And Prof has been a man steering the affairs in the background. He doesn't speak much, but he has the solutions, I know, for setting. Prof, thank you again. Also, to help us navigate our way through making the SHS sustainable in terms of funding is Israel Titi Ofer. He's a principal of the SOS Herman Gemeinde Internationals College. A round of applause for him. Israel Titi Ofer. Mr. Titi Ofer, thank you very much for coming as well. Also joining us is a man who has been crunching the numbers. I tried my own crunching. It's not easy, but let's see what the projections say from the perspective of those who have made it their business to look at the numbers and see what it says. He is the former Vice Chancellor of the University of Ghana and an economist with ISA, Professor Ernest Aite. A round of applause for him, Professor Aite, who has agreed to join us this morning. So we're going to start. Each of them will give us their own set of presentations, 15 minutes each. If they can do it in less time, fantastic. After which, we will interrogate a bit of the things they've said on this side of the building. And later on, I will invite you to also join with your questions and contributions. Ghana is listening and watching on Joy 99.7 FM, also on the JoyNews channel on Multi TV. We are live on many social media platforms on the graphic app as well. And so if you are listening to us wherever you are, both here in Ghana and elsewhere abroad, and you want to join us, please feel free to do so. I'll be announcing the many social media handles. You can join us with your questions on. I'll share those questions with them as we together explore how to make this sustainable. I will invite first with this presentation the Director General of the Ghana Education Service, Professor Poku Amankwa. Prof, you can make your presentation. You want to sit or you want to? PowerPoint. Okay, so please join us up here.
Good morning, ladies and gentlemen. I believe if I need to do protocol by introducing or acknowledging, I may have to virtually acknowledge everyone in here. So just as we always say, all protocol observed. You are all welcome. And thank you for coming. Evans, I want to start by saying you close your comments by asking, is it sustainable? And I believe this question has been asked a number of times. And you usually meet people and they ask you, hey, namubet miaye, namubenya sikano. And my simple question is that it is not for more. So it is not more who are finding the money. It is for us. It is our ship. So it is up to us to decide whether we want the ship to sink or we want the ship to stay afloat. So yes, you bet me aye, because it's our ship. We all have to come together to do it. And let me also thank Graphic, Stanbic, and all the organizers for giving us this opportunity to talk about education. In the past, when I first heard about breakfast shows or breakfast meetings, it's always about some businessmen, corporate people going to meet probably the president or some high-level person to have breakfast and talk about issues. Scarcely was education on our breakfast. But thank God today, education is on our breakfast. And just as the Deputy Minister indicated, and many others have said, it is the only key to our success. And it's our ship. We have to find a way to make sure that it works. Sometimes when in the evening, the family is ready to retire to bed, and I see the processes that we go through, locking ourselves up, chaining ourselves, because we want to make sure that we sleep safely, I always go back and say, we have a problem. And the problem, I believe, as the minister has said, is about education. We have run a system that has led to a situation where many people have been left out there, and now they also have to survive. And they find a way of surviving which threatens our survival. So we need to make a conscious effort to make sure that whatever system that we've put in place works and works well. Now, my presentation is on the education policy. I'll do a very short presentation, and then when we go into the discussion, we'll then have more to say about it. Now, by way of background, we are saying that the Article 25(1) of the 1992 Constitution emphasizes the right to education when it says all persons shall have the right to equal educational opportunities and facilities. Now, Article 25A to E, they all give further meaning to the point. But for me, I want to just look at A and B because they relate more to basic education. The others also talk about tertiary and then also functional education. Now, the A talks about basic education shall be free, compulsory, and available to all secondary, to all. The next one also talks about secondary education in all its different forms, including technical and vocational education, shall be made generally available and accessible to all by every appropriate means, and in particular by the progressive introduction of free education. When we look at the Sustainable Development Goals, it also reiterates and makes the point for the need for education. And in part, it talks about that we have to ensure inclusive and equitable quality education and promote lifelong learning opportunities for all. Now, before the election, I think Evans spoke about that, somewhere between 2012, at least between 2012 and 2016, there was some form of consensus on the need for free education, at least to secondary level, except that different political parties and the ideology, they approach it differently. But much earlier on, as a requirement of the Constitution, we had the free, compulsory, universal basic education, the F-Cube, which started way back in 1996. And as a way of ensuring that, a number of interventions have been in place. Some of them have just been listed. The capitation grant, which was introduced in 2005, free uniforms, sandals, bags for selected needy peoples, which is still running, school feeding, which is also part of some of the efforts to ensure that we achieve the free, compulsory, basic education. Then, in 2017, last year, as part of the manifesto promise of the government, the current government, the free SHS program was introduced. Earlier on in 2015, the previous government introduced the progressively free SHS. Now, there's free SHS. The major plank of the free SHS package is the absorption of all fees approved by the Ghana Education Council and then subsequently submitted to the government. And this excludes, of course, PTA. Let me also take opportunity, once I have PTA in here, let me take this opportunity to talk about PTA. Parents, NGOs, development partners, corporate bodies, they are all partners and stakeholders in education. And we always encourage and want them to contribute, alumni, old boys, old girls, etc. But the idea behind their contribution is that it supports whatever government is doing. It's government's responsibility to ensure that the basic education and then the free SHS that has been introduced works. Now, we are almost getting into a situation where you have students denied access to education because they have not paid PTA dues. Our new direction, as far as PTA dues is concerned, is that yes, parents and all other well-wishers can contribute and should contribute and will be encouraged to do that, but under no circumstance should an association dues, parent-teacher association, which invariably is parent association. Under no circumstance should someone who belongs to an association who has not paid his or her dues, we go to a third person and then we ask that third person, or we deny that third person some access because a parent has failed to do that. So PTAs have the latitude to work, but I think we have indicated to them that they should have innovative ways of doing it. Now, if you have 2 children in a school and you belong to the association, you are a member of the association. And associations pay membership dues per person. You don't pay membership dues per number of children that you have. And we want to insist on that. PTAs can find various ways. It should act as a voluntary association supporting what government is doing. And we expect that they could come up with various packages. It shouldn't be necessary that everybody is paying the same amount, and then the amount that you pay should not be tied to your child. Say that when you have not paid, the child will be asked to go out and then bring the money. Okay. So the free SHS, the main purpose is to prepare and equip the youth with attitude for further and lifelong education, as well as unemployable skills for the world of work. We've given some rationale or justification for that. And the first one says, the implementation of the free SHS program, among other things, is aimed at addressing irregularity and to ensure equal opportunities for students through the removal of cost barriers. And I think the minister has articulated that. It is also to enable students who would have terminated their education at the JHS level to acquire functional and employable skills at the SHS level. Now, at the JHS level, the average age is 14. And if a child terminates his education at that level, our country's regulations and laws do not allow such people to be working. And so what it means is that we leave them idle, and then they find something for their idle hands. So at least if they stay in school till age 18, we expect that they would have been matured enough to go into the world of work if they want, or they can then continue to tertiary. Now, it is also to enable students who have terminated, to enhance the human capital of the country by making secondary education the minimum academic qualification, and then also to improve quality of secondary education through reforms, systems, improvement, and accountability for performance. What are the objectives? The free SHS policy hinges on 4 pillars: access, equity, quality, and skills development. So by way of expanding secondary education, we are giving access. Now, we also want to ensure that no one is denied access to education because of gender, ethnicity, religion, or physical ability or disability. We want a system of education that is inclusive for all. It is also to ensure that students who exit secondary education have the academic preparation to pursue further education. And then it is also to provide adequate resources to promote effective teaching and learning. Then we also talk about development, industrialization. We cannot industrialize if we don't have people with skills and ability to do things with their hands. So the free SHS also emphasizes skills development. Now, in line with this, there are also other policy initiatives that will all help to complement the free SHS policy and programs. We have the teacher professionalization. We have the teacher education. Now, teacher education is moving from basic diploma certificate to a first degree graduate certificate. Then we have a series of reforms going on in our curriculum in terms of the content, and very soon it will be rolled out. We also have always spoken about issues of quality, and one of the ways of ensuring quality is about school inspection and accountability of teachers and heads. And as I indicated, the direction now is to have a separate unit or agency to champion the work in TVET to ensure that we concentrate more on skills development for the industrialization drive that we have always been talking of. Ladies and gentlemen, this in brief is about our educational policy. As we get into the discussions, we may touch on other issues. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much, Prof. And very interesting slides there. We'll be interrogating a bit of that very shortly, but I want to quickly now invite also a second presentation from Israel Titi Ofer, is the principal of the SOS Gemeinde International College. Please join us with your presentation. And remember that financing free quality education in Ghana, sustainable funding options. Start thinking about it as we begin to interrogate what we have from our panel members, please.
Good morning. Good morning, Prof. Jangba. Good morning, Prof. Adamesa, and my good friend. This has been a long fight, and I greet the gentlemen because they've been at the forefront of the fight in many different ways. How can we create or build creative packaging of content and policies for funding free education? Now, the way this is framed means you should be looking beyond government for funding. You should be building something that is attractive to businesses, philanthropy, individuals, so they can fund it. What is quality education? We cannot start to think about quality if we don't talk about the issue of equity, the issue of inclusiveness. We cannot have the kind of education that leaves certain people behind and promote other people. And I think these are issues that Prof. Adamesa, for example, has elaborated on. If we want to attract people to fund, then the outcomes needed for individuals, communities, and societies must be good. We need to have skills that are relevant in our time. In our time. I also read the World Bank report that said 56% of all young people in schools today would lose their human capital, or the nation would lose the human capital of 56% of all young people in schools today. Why? And I think that we all know what the issues are. We've been talking about it. Even the women in Makola who have not gone to school know that our policies are poor. Okay, thank you. My side is not too good. So, I've spoken to many people in business, managing their own business, and they tell me, yes, we hire people. We hire graduates from our universities. They cannot write. They cannot think about issues, and this is general, it's not specific. Definitely, there will be young people who are extraordinary. But in the main, people have qualifications but have no skills. They do not have the skills that industry need in order to make the progress that they want to make, or in order to make this economy grow, in order to make individuals grow and attain their aspirations in life. So, we need to have a quality curriculum, and that is what we have not done. I'm not talking about physics and history here. I'm talking about skills that can infuse the work we do in schools. I'm talking about developing a curriculum in which is embedded the skills and attitudes that our children need now and for the future. We need to think about now and the future, because the people we are thinking about, they live now, they're in schools now, they are the ones who will manage our economies in the future. I recently read that 30% of all jobs that exist now will be extinct in the next 30 years. They will no longer exist because robots will do the work. Now, the thinking is, who will program the robots? Who will design the robots? We have to begin to think in an engineering program, what changes should be made? What kind of open-mindedness should young people take to schools? And it's not something we talk about, it's something that we really implement with all the accountability structures and regular evaluation. We heard all the things that were built into the JHS program. And children actually don't have the time to even learn how to nail a chair. They cannot even change bulbs. When we look deeply into why we are where we are, we should look at the education we've given our children. I do not think that we've prepared our children well. And the young people of today who are going into the world of work have also not been prepared well. And that has to change. And I'm not saying this for any class of people, I'm saying it for all of us. What do we need to put into this curriculum? This is a general view. And I'm looking at areas where we need to pay attention, whether I'm teaching. Recently, I met a young man who's put his physics and ideas of technology together to design a walking stick for blind people. Why? In his physics lessons, the teacher is able to explain the applications of light to this young man to the extent that he now brings the knowledge from the two areas together. But they're not so different, they're all sciences. And he designs a walking stick. So what do we need? Really, what do we need in order to change attitudes, in order to build skills, in order to prepare our young people for the future? Number one is we need good teachers, and I'm happy to see that the ministry is aiming to do that, to improve teacher education. But I'm hoping that we don't do the same things. Whilst the policy is being made at the ministry, the teacher trainers are also revising the training of teachers. I'm a school headmaster. Today, recruitment of teachers is one of our biggest problems, and it's something that we have discussed at the level of our association. How do we improve teacher recruitment? How do we hire good teachers? Should we begin to set up our own training programs? Most taxi drivers either have the BEC or SHS. They cannot read maps. Yes, they cannot think. In other, we compare ourselves to the Southeast Asian nations. In Singapore, you sit in a car, the taxi driver knows exactly where you're going. They can read maps, they can read GPS, This is not magic today. This is reality today. All our young people have phones. The taxi driver has the most expensive phone, but cannot read GPS. Problem solving, communication. Speak to young men on the streets. Or frequently I'm taken aback at the way young people rush to your car to clean the screens. There's no thinking, there's no communication between those young people, so that one can take the car that is there now and the other can wait for the next car. I think this is common sense. But all of them will come to your car. A lot of the young women who sell Kenke and Yamwansa have also finished JHS. But they will all come to your car. There's no communication. They will not say, you take that, I take the next one. It's affecting our economy. It's affecting their livelihoods. And I also have character and integrity, collaboration, creativity, diversity. We need to embed all these, not just talk about them, they have to be part of the curriculum that we teach. And somebody has got to sit down and make it mandatory for schools to do this, not just learn physics and math, which we are very good at. I listen to the competition between schools. Young people quickly do the calculation, but that is not what we need. We need how to apply those ideas, those concepts, and that means we have to embed it in our curriculum. And I've compared what we teach in our schools with others. I always think when I change it from here. How can we get this done? I believe that schools should be autonomous in deciding certain things for themselves. The regulator should set the framework. The framework should be there. Schools are in different environments. For example, young people in a Chinswa secondary school cannot do the same things that perhaps Achimota school does in the same way because they live in a different environment. But a framework should be set with clear goals of what schools can attain and what they should do, depending on where they are located. And this has to be inclusive. It's not a group of people like us sitting somewhere and coming up with a framework. It should be inclusive. We have to visit the communities. We have to know what is there. We have to know what is applicable. I don't think curriculum development is an easy thing. It's a difficult thing. It takes time. And it has to involve the people that it affects. It has to be reviewed regularly. I'm aware of school programs that are reviewed, some 2 years, some 4 years, and each review goes with teacher education. We have to do this. It costs money, a lot of money to develop programs, yes, but we have to do that. Now, the big problem is funding. Isn't government already spending money? We have to look at how government money is spent in providing input for schools. We have to look at the efficiency with which monies are spent in our educational system. It really must be subjected to review because we can't find some of the money from government to do this. I know that people have talked about equity and so on, but I do have a very controversial suggestion. The director at the ministry definitely can afford certain things for school or for educating his children, but it is free for him. It is. The charcoal burner in Mampo Kwapim, definitely, if it's not free, cannot afford it. So in the same way as we do taxation system at a certain level, you're giving tax holiday, and then it's built up to now 35%. I think that with a national ID, and I don't think it's a joke, national ID is not a joke. And if it's not a joke, it means that it must have data for every Ghanaian. So we know what people do, where they live, how much they earn. For example, these days you go to the bank, they say, bring your TIN number. I guess very soon they will ask you, where did you get the money from? So we have a means of determining what people do, how much they earn, and their capabilities, financial capabilities. If we are all contributing to the nation, then those who are down there and cannot afford should have free education. And those who are the upper end of the scale must pay. My view. Yes, sir. I also talk about independence for schools to do their own things. And if Stanbic sees my curriculum or what I want to do in the framework that the government has set, and I'm really training my kids well, and they want to give me money to continue to do that, they should feel free to do so. And school managers must market these within the accountability structures that are set. So these are my introductory words, and I'll be happy to answer all your questions. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Professor Nesaite, let me invite you to wrap it up for us before we start our conversation.
Thank you very, very much. And let me also thank the organizers for inviting me to be a part of this morning's panel discussion. I've been asked to comment on how to finance free quality senior high school education. And I'm very happy that all the speakers before me have emphasized the need for quality in our education. That's where the problem is, how to ensure that there is enhanced quality of education and that it's so I have three main messages. I decided to put these out first. I don't want my words to be distorted. I don't want anybody to, when I accepted to come here, the whole world asked me what was wrong with me, whether I wasn't tired of being misquoted and so on. So today I've put there what I want to say. If you see any headline that is different from what you are reading, don't believe it, and tell the whole world that. The concern about the quality of education, of senior high school education in Ghana is real and will be the main source of income inequality in future. I'm concerned about the future of this country. I'm concerned about the growing inequality in the system, and I'm concerned about the fact that education, or the lack of it, is going to make it worse if we don't do anything about it. For free senior high school education to deliver good quality, the issue of resource requirements has to be dealt with, and it's huge. How do you finance free senior high school education? How do you ensure that we are putting enough money into senior high school education? In the end, I will be advocating a targeted approach that will ensure that all those who can contribute do make contributions. It's enormous. The requirements for delivering quality high school education, the requirements are huge. And so it's not, as far as I'm concerned, at our level of development to leave it to only one party to deal with. We all have to contribute one way or the other. So these are the three main messages. I haven't said we don't need free senior high school education. So I don't want to see any of those things. Inequality and education. In the latest figures released by the Statistical Service, inequality in Ghana has worsened somewhat in the last decade or so, 12 years. We brought down poverty significantly over a 15-year period, and that period also we saw inequality shrink. In the last GLSS survey, the GLSS 7, the figures show that in some parts of Ghana, poverty is going up again. In a lot of the rural savannah area, inequality is worsening. I bring out this point because if we are an economy that seeks to restructure, transform, and we have worsening inequality, it means that a large part of the society is going to be left behind. We're going to have a society that is more and more unequal and therefore unable to contribute to the transformation that we are talking about. Generally, education is the weapon for dealing with inequality. As people get better educated and their human capital value goes up, they're able to contribute more and earn higher incomes and break the gap between themselves and the not so poor. If we are seeing inequality, we've got to deal with it. So I, as an economist, I'm interested in how we tackle inequality using education to do that. Today, we have an education system that has a number of attributes that we need to be mindful of. The challenges that we have always faced over the past 40 years have been the issues of access and then the quality of education. When it comes to access, we've seen significant improvements. It doesn't mean that there are no challenges there at all. We've seen significant improvements, for both at the basic level and at the secondary level. We've seen significant improvements. So we've seen the gross enrollment rates for basic go up to 96.5 in 2012. For the junior high school, 85.4%. These are significant improvements. Clearly, there are still a few challenges that we got to. So that's, for me, an indication that the efforts made over the last 40 years have not been in vain, that something is happening, that kids are going to school, albeit not in every village in this country, not in every town in this country, and even in the cities, there are kids that do not go to school. Of course, we are concerned about what happens when they go to school. We know about the kids that go to school at the trees. We know about classrooms that have no teachers. We know about classrooms that have no furniture. So we know all of these things. But the remarkable thing, and I guess that's what is reflected in the Human Capital Index, is the fact that even though the kids are coming into the classroom, they are not able to do what is expected of them at the ages, different ages, and so on. So in many of the national examinations, they perform badly. Teacher supply and teacher motivation is something that has always been highlighted as a source of problem. So this chart basically provides the results of the latest National Education Assessment, which done by the Ministry of Education and the GES. Basically, what it's telling us is that for both English and mathematics, the number of children at the P6 level who are proficient is very low, less than 40% for English, and then less than just about 20% for English. And there's a problem there. Kids are finishing P6, but they can't do what kids at that age must be doing, and that's a basic problem. This chart again shows you the competency and proficiency results for English and mathematics at the P4 and the P6 levels. 29% with English, P4, 38% P6 English. Basically, they just are not passing the standard exams. I do understand that for the proficiency measurements, we are using a pass rate that is lower than the average around the world. So basically, even though we have reduced the standard, our kids are not passing these exams that are set for their age levels around the world. Again, we do for mathematics, the number of kids failing these professionalism is quite high. We need for P4 and then also provided for P6. There is a problem. So the kids that are going to the senior high schools do have challenges with reading, understanding English, and also doing basic, providing the numeracy skills, doing basic calculations. They do have that problem. And so there's a challenge that we need to address. We provide some data on the early grade reading assessments. These are the percentages of kids who couldn't score zero. They score zero by language and by reading. So even for the local languages, the kids can't do it. So they have challenges with English, and then they have challenges with local languages. Again, we do it for the higher levels, and you find these kids having these challenges. We provide for mathematics, as we did for English, and then you find that very basic things that kids at that age, at age 6 and then at age 8 should be doing, they simply cannot do. As the challenges or the task given them becomes a little bit more complex, you find the numbers dropping very, very sharply. When you go to the higher, or the JSS, age 15, there are these standard exams that are provided in about 60 countries for kids of that age, basically to see what they're able to perform and then compare. What the teams show for Ghana is that we were right at the bottom there with I think South Africa. Again, this is for the mathematics. We've provided for science, again, at the bottom. And then we do it for the compared to 2011. Again, there we are at the bottom. So we sort of seem to be stuck at the bottom there over the teams. Anyway, with our own WASI, we've seen how kids have struggled basically with English and mathematics, and also the integrated science. So there are clear indications that our kids are struggling in school. At the basic level, at the secondary level, there are clear indications, which is all summarized by the Human Capital Index that the World Bank launched last week. What it is basically saying is that the average Ghanaian who has had all the education that's required of 18 years of education, 15 years of education, cannot do what is required of him or her, does not have the capabilities of somebody who has spent, and it takes into account not simply passing examinations, but also your health conditions and the environment in which you've grown up. So we do have problems. We cannot run away from these problems. Now, of course, is free senior high school education the solution? Is that the solution? As has been said, our government has chosen free senior high school education as the way out. My concern is that many of the challenges faced in the schools have arisen not because there's no room to go to or classroom to go to. They've arisen because we have not spent enough money on those classrooms to equip them. So whether they are in very good schools like Achimota, or in bad schools like Yachipram, so as the Deputy Minister was saying, I'm quoting the Deputy Minister on this. So whether they are in these schools, Achimota or Yachipram, so the kind of equipment needed for the future, for the transformation, is not there. It's not there. So you have a situation where even your elite schools are poorly resourced. What it is leading to, that there is a new dichotomy between the public schools, including the best ones, and the private schools, like Mr. Titi Ofe's school. There's a new, so what is happening is the wealthy in Ghana, they take their kids from Achibota, from Presec, from GSTS, from wherever, and take them to TIS, SOS, what else? GIS, and so on. And that's what is happening. So in another 10 years, those kids from Achimota School, from Presec, from Sunyani, from Tamale, who went to public schools, will not be able to compete with those kids from these other schools. That's where the inequality will come in. And they will find the better jobs. They will become the managers. They will become the lawyers. They will become the doctors. They will become the professors. Why? So I'm not worried about the elite public school because it is not doing well anyway. I'm worried about the gap that is emerging in Ghana. We are in a Ghana where, depending on the choices you make, your children have an advantage. So the solution is, let's fix the public schools, all of them, from the best to the worst. Let's fix them. And you can fix them by spending more on these schools. When I looked at the budget statement, it provided for 1.1 billion, 1.3 billion to support free SHS for 2018. We've done our own calculations, looking at the budgets of schools. To maintain the status quo, we need 3.3 billion cedis, not to 1.3. We need 3.3 billion, putting aside the teachers' salaries and so on. So we are looking at the goods and services provided, feeding the kids, maintaining classrooms, providing security and so on. We need 3.3 billion. It's not going to come from the budget next year. The only way you can put it in there is to deny other parts of the economy the revenues required for their own operations. So if that is the case, how do you deal with it? How do you mobilize more resources? We talk about this slide basically summarizes what I've just said. I believe that in order for us to meet the requirements and the challenges ahead, we need all to contribute. And I talk about bringing the infrastructure in through partnerships with the private sector. Science labs need to be modernized. The labs that we have in our schools are antiquated. We need modern, smart labs in order for our kids to compete with the Koreans and the Singaporeans. And the government can't afford it. The Ghana government can't afford it. So we need partnership with the private sector to bring in these things. How do we structure them? That can be discussed. Of course, parents have to contribute. I know that the GES is averse to parents' contribution. By telling parents, don't make any contribution through fees, you are putting aside 60% of all that they need to make those schools run. For what reason? I haven't seen around the world any school, boarding school, where you go to for free. I haven't seen it, except in Ghana today. How do you tell somebody, go to Wesley Girls, go to Infanticum, eat 3 times a day, but don't pay anything? I'm worried about that. I am concerned that in our haste to provide a free SHS, we are not taking into account all the principles that we should be. There's nothing wrong with taking from the rich to pay for the poor. There's nothing wrong with it. The Bible even supports that. So where parents can afford it, let us do it. So my suggestion is, we need to target. It should be possible for us to categorize schools depending on their endowments. There are schools that are well endowed and those that are not well endowed. It's possible to target them. But we can also think about rural, urban. We can think about north, south. There are several things that we can think about. And then schools that are clearly less endowed or clearly more challenged than others, we can target them for support, make them free for as many as possible. We can do that. There are schools that we can exempt from the free status, largely because they can mobilize resources to find their way. The GS talks about 55 schools. They are scattered all over Ghana in different parts of the Ghana. The parents there generally are able to afford the fees. The parents are able to afford. We can introduce means testing that will tell us who can afford and who cannot afford. So once we do that, those parents that can afford then contribute to what it costs to run the school, to provide for the school. If we did that, we'll be able to improve substantially how much will be added to the 1.3 billion to go closer to the 3.3 billion that is required. If we did that, if clearly there are schools that are better endowed than others and should not be closed at all to other kids simply because their parents are not in a position to afford them. That's why you have scholarships. So Achimota School, Presec, Infantifim, Wesley Girls, St. Mary's, Accra Girls, they can give scholarships. If it's for 30%, let's agree on the figure. I don't want to prescribe any particular amount or number, but let's agree on how many kids in Accra can go to Achimota School for free. How many kids can go to Presec or go to Abri Girls for free? Let's do that. And so the parents know that as a result of how much they earn, they will have to pay. And I'm sure there'll be many Ghanaian parents who will be happy to do that instead of going to pay to go to GIS. There are many Ghanaian parents who will be happy to do that. So that's the approach that I bring to this discussion. I don't have anything against free SHS, but parents who can afford it should be made to contribute. That's the solution that I bring to the discussion. So in my conclusion, I say simply, improving the quality of SHS will cost more money because you need more equipment, you need good teachers, they need to be supported. The state trying to do it alone will be problematic because it doesn't have the resources. And then private participation, including from parents, will provide an assurance of sustainability. Thank you.
Hello? Good. Thank you very much, Prof. Thought-provoking contribution. A bigger round of applause on my panel. In the next 45 minutes, we're going to sort of interrogate what we've just heard and also invite you to chip in with your own contributions and questions. I want to start by bringing back in Professor Poku Amankwa. And both Prof and Mr. Titiofe make the point. Target the policy. I mean, I can afford to pay for my son to go to senior high school. Why should I pay for free? Is government thinking about doing that, or are we still insisting that it should be free for everybody, regardless of how much you earn at the end of the month?
Okay. Yeah, thank you, Evans. I think this debate is a very interesting one. I start by asking ourselves, over the last 60 years or so, when parents paid, have we been able to achieve what we wanted to achieve? So, yes, we can always say that parents should pay, we should target, we should do that. But the other aspect that I also want us to look at is that, let's be frank with ourselves, there is some level of honesty that we need in this country to be able to do that. And I'll give you a couple of examples. You go to the universities now, and then the students have something that they call Ketwebiensa as a way of supporting the needy student. Go into that fund and find out who assesses that fund. It is those who actually have who assess that fund. Let's go back to the scholarship that we did, what do you call the COCO, CMB scholarship.
Yes.
Any fair assessment will show you that over the years, the CMB, the cocoa growers, did not really benefited from that. You know, so yet the rich can always pay, but I think before we do that, we need to do a thorough background on that, a very good, honest means test, so that we can always say that, yes, if you go to the public servant now and you say that because you're a public servant, you are a director pay, the public servant will tell you all the reasons. He will give you his pay packet, and you realize that probably the other person should be paying, but not him. You know, so we need to really, probably if a group is doing it, or as a nation, we get people to do a very good study, a very good analysis of it, then we can take it from that angle.
There's a proposal I've heard, and I've heard the economists point to this, that the GRA at the end of the month takes our income taxes. And so at least there is if you want to start from there is a certain group of people already that we know in the system that earn a certain amount of money. There's the reason why the finance minister in the recent budget that was done, the media review, said they were increasing how much the threshold for income taxes, because they know there's a certain group of people who earn that. And can't we start from there? GRA has the statistics. I pay my income tax at the end of the year and the end of the month. They know how many people in the system earn above that threshold, a certain threshold. Can't we start using that data to target and say, if you earn within the certain band, which the finance minister has used to peg, about a certain threshold, your kids will not benefit from the free SHS. Isn't that the starting point at least?
Well, it could be, but we need finances for it. But really, why do we want the parent to pay or not to pay? And if he's paying, we have all agreed here that the key issue is about quality. So if a parent pays, how does it affect quality or does not affect quality? So which way are we paying? Are we paying towards, and if you look at the payments that have been going on all this while, they go into some areas that at the end of the day, they really affect quality. So for me, as I've said, it's something that we need to look at it holistically, not to rush into making any decisions that at the end of it all will not inure to the benefit of the entire system.
Okay.
Yeah.
Mr. Chokwe, the government, and this is the finance minister to be very specific, and come to the proposal that you made in the 2018 budget, suggested a solution that I guess attempted to deal with the problem of targeting. And I want to read the budget just for the avoidance of doubt. And as Prof said, he doesn't want to be misquoted, so I want to read this. It says, and this is the finance minister reading the 2018 budget. Mr. Speaker, with the successful launch of the free SHS program, government received proposals from the public, several of which encourage the establishment of a fund to receive voluntary contributions to support education. Thankfully, the GET Fund law allows for the setting up of other education-related funds. In 2018, the ministry will work, and 2018 is just about ending. 2018, the ministry will work with GET Fund to set up this education fund to enable Ghanaians to make voluntary contributions to support education. And Doc, Prof, I'll come to you to give us an update on this, but just a comment on that. Is this the way to deal with your concerns, if indeed this voluntary fund is going to be set up?
I have two contributions to make. First of all, we haven't heard anything about the overhaul of the GET Fund. What do they do? In the past, I think they taxed us to put the money there. What do they do with the money? Have they given proper custody of the money? That's question number one. Number two is, people will contribute if it goes into what improves the sector. All over the world, there's philanthropy giving for education. Some schools are actually built on that. I believe there are Ghanaians and Ghanaian companies that can make that contribution, but they will not make it if the money goes to waste. So you need a structure that is accountable, that is clear to everyone, and that is equitable for people to give. Because, again, if I'm a successful northern farmer and I contribute to such a fund, and I see the schools in the north are in bad state, I will not contribute. This is my contribution.
I see. Let me take But Professor Aite, your suggestion, though, about targeting, and we've heard the concern, we don't have the data to target, I guess is the, I mean, in this country where a lot of us are in the informal sector, where data is a challenge. I know you work with data, so you appreciate the challenge we have. How can we target? The other countries who've done it, they've done it on the back of strong data, so they know who earns what, who doesn't. How do you address that in dealing with the funding?
Thank you very much. There's no easy way to do it, but there are tested ways that have worked in many different places, and even in Ghana. Let me give you an example. At the University of Ghana, we have a scheme for needy students, where the university's money is available. Students who can't afford to pay fees can apply for a grant or an exemption. And it works. We've seen the numbers grow steadily over the years. When we began, there was always the issue of how are you going to determine who was eligible and who was not. At the time students applied to come to the university, they indicated who their parents were and what incomes they had. You know, so if you applied to come to the university and your father was a sergeant in the Ghana Army, we know how much he earns as a
lie.
Sorry?
What if I lie on the phone?
What if you lied?
Professor Pukamaka talks about honesty.
Yes, fine, yeah. So of course, it means that it's your responsibility to show us that you cannot pay. It is your responsibility to show, we need to find out where you live, for example. If you went to Achimota School and you paid school fees for 3 years, and then all of a sudden you can't pay, there's a problem. So there are ways in which you can assess the credibility of the information that you've been given. We've got to start from somewhere. You know, we've got to start from somewhere.
Okay. Prophet Puamankwa, and I'll come to my audience very short because I see a lot of you are eager to question, but can you give us an update on the voluntary fund that the finance minister said will be set up in 2018? We are a month away from ending the year. Do we know if this has been set up? And you can speak into this.
I believe this question should have been asked to the minister. But what I can say is that immediately after that, some discussions have gone on, but the fund has not been set up as far as but some discussions around it, because setting up such a fund, especially when you already have GET fund, you need some modalities to make sure that it works out. But some discussions have gone on around it. Yeah.
I want to invite my audience to join in. There's a few microphones, so in fact, you can get this one as well. And if you raise your hands, there's a hand there that I will take first. Do I have more hands? Do I have more questions or contributions? I want to take 3. There's one beside you. So when you finish, please hand the microphone right next to the gentleman beside you. Do I have another one? I want 3 before I will. There's another hand at the back. There. Yes. Please, sir, your name and your contribution or question. And please make it brief for us.
My name is Eric. I'm from Sabuatin. I'm a tax consultant. This issue about parents not paying, I don't agree with you. I remember very well that in 1978, when we sat for the common entrance, my mom wasn't financially sound, but because I had to study the whole of the country, I was third, okay? So I attended Infansipim, and because of hard work, immediately I gained admission. I had the head of state
scholarship.
Yes, at that time. And then after the first term, we had an examination, and then Infansipim school went ahead and gave me the bursary. So the point I'm trying to make is that somebody ought to pay, and I know that most of the parents who have the awards in that school, just last night, I was in Cape Coast. I came back, we had a speech day. And then anytime we go for the speech day, I just look around. What I look out for, the type of vehicles that are there. Parents can afford to pay. And so if the government says that there's free SHS, it is affecting the quality of our education. And so I think that we ought to go back. Now, we have...
But you acknowledge there's a difference between afford to pay and willingness to pay.
Yes.
But because I can afford to pay, but I may not be willing to pay.
Oh, but with the tax identification number, that we are saying that if we are to work by it, or with it, you will know how much everybody is paying. I mean, it's earning. And so parents should be able to pay. Now, the other issue is that companies, private individuals, can be brought in to help. If you look at...
But what is the incentive? And I've heard this a lot. I wanted to interrogate. What is the incentive for the private business like Stanbic to put its money in
That is where the government has to come in with a policy that will encourage companies, individuals to contribute to. Now we have the National Fiscal Stabilization Levy, which has to end in 2018. So I'm expecting the Minister for Finance to introduce something, maybe National Education Fund Levy, for companies to pay a certain percentage of their profit before tax. You know, for now it is 5%. It's 5%, but if you don't make profit, you don't pay. So once the National Fiscal Levy is ending this year, I don't expect the minister to extend it. And I know, of course, that on Thursday he's going to do that. He should shelve it and rather bring in maybe National Education Fund, and I would pay maybe 2% of your profit before tax. And then what happens is that those companies that pay, you give them incentives.
Fantastic suggestion. Thank you very much. So
the last one.
If we can do it in 10 seconds,
okay.
Fine.
Okay, now this year we introduced a new tax, tax band of 35%. Yes. It is killing individuals. You see, those who brought in this law, they didn't know that it was going to affect the sole proprietor, because it is these same rates that we are going to use. So what is happening in Ghana now is that the sole proprietor is paying more tax than the corporate ones. So I think that in his budget, he has to review it.
Okay.
And then we'll move forward. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Thank you very much. So that's a suggestion. Use the taxes, use taxation as a way of forcing private businesses to contribute to education. I'll ask Professor Aites' view on that very shortly. By the way, before I hear the next question or contribution, I just want to just try this. I mean, who amongst us here is willing to pay for their children to go to senior high school even when we still have free senior high school policy? Who is willing to pay? You will pay for your child. Yes, Professor Mamka said to write your name, so don't just raise your hand. I just want to test this theory. I just want to test this theory. Who amongst, and I want to see by hand, seriously. Okay, so this is like 50% of the house. Oh, it's not 50. What percentage do you see? 35%. He says he sees 35%. Say again. 60%. Okay, let's take the high side of it, 60%. That leaves 40% of the people in this room who say they won't pay. What? I should ask the question again. Okay. The question is, which of us, who amongst us here is willing, okay, to pay for the awards to go to senior high school, even when there is a policy to make it free? Who amongst us here will do that? You will pay. You will put money into it. I don't see any hands here. Okay, so yeah, I mean, it's between 60 and 40% of the house. 70%. Okay. Okay. So that's the question. So there's 30% of us here at least. It's a bad assumption. No, but I'm seeing the hands. I should ask individually. Can you give the microphone to the please give the microphone. I want to, yes.
The fact that they didn't raise their hands doesn't mean they'll pay. So ask the second question.
Uh-huh.
Ask those who will not pay.
Okay. Who amongst us will not pay?
Aha. Now you're talking. Everybody will pay for good quality education. Everybody will.
Okay. So again, the second question, who amongst us will not pay?
So everybody is willing to pay for good quality education.
But not necessarily. I mean, how do you interpret that, by the way? Professor, how do you interpret what we just did? I mean, it's not scientific, but it gives you a sense of what this is. I mean, how do you interpret this? You can speak into this microphone, this one. Yes, it's on.
I think if people are sure that they will have quality for their children, they will pay. Because it won't happen. Even when you have the money, it takes time to train teachers. It takes time to acquire the inputs. It takes time to bring about change in education. But we need a good plan that is verifiable that we can do that. Prof. I think when people have that, they will pay.
Okay. Prof.
Yeah, thank you. Evans, when you asked your first question, I began by saying that over the last 60 years, that parents have always paid. Have we not complained about quality?
Even when we're paying about quality. Yeah.
Have we not complained about quality? So why are we all of a sudden making quality and payment as the moment you pay, you get quality? You know, there are a lot of things that go into it. And until we all come to a consensus and get some of the things right, I am not sure it's just merely about payment. Now, let me also take this opportunity to talk about this. When Prof. Aite spoke, he indicated that GES is averse to parents paying. GES is not averse to anyone contributing to education in terms of funding. GES has always worked with old boys and old girls. Have we ever had a problem with that? No. GES has always worked with partners, USAID, DFID, etc. We've never had any challenge with that. Now, the issue about parents paying through PTA is that we've had situations where students have been sacked from class because they've not paid PTA. And we are saying that it shouldn't be so. It shouldn't be so. Now that the government is paying the basic that you need to be in school, there's no need for you for 15 cedis, 20 cedis, you drive a student out of class because he's not paid that. And if you do that, that is unfair to the child. PTA is an association. Again, if we look at it critically, it's an association between teachers and parents. how many teachers contribute in terms of money? They don't. It's all about parents paying. And we tie this to the individual students. Said that teachers will go into the class and just do a roll call and say, you haven't paid, go home and go and bring the money. You know, and we think that that is not fair to the students. Parents can contribute. This fund that we're talking about, if it is activated and people contribute into it, parents and all other people, the hands that we saw, if they contribute into it, then we will then decide on how we're going to use the money. Now, we've had a situation where there is extra classes that parents are supposed to pay. Now, in the extra class, in the main class, the teacher will do a chapter or an aspect of the subject. In the extra class, he continues what he did in the main class. Then next day, he continues. If he's doing chapter by chapter, chapter 1 in the main class, chapter 2 in the extra class, and then chapter 3 in the next class. So if a student was not able to pay, then the student is missing chapter 2 and will not even understand chapter 3. And for us, we think that that shouldn't be the situation. Once the government has agreed to give the funding that you need to go to school, yes, we are all saying that that is not enough, we need more, but we should look at various ways of doing that. Now we talk about this thing that has come up, and we are all supposed to register and all that. Now, if we can develop a system that at the end of the day, you are a watch seller, you sell ice water, whatever, you can come and show some evidence, not the amount per se, but you can come and show some evidence that I have contributed A, B, C. They will say that once you show this evidence, your child will enjoy free SHS. You know, I believe that if we can do this, a lot of people, the poor, the rich, will be willing. That once you show some evidence that these things that you have sold over this period, you have contributed this much as a form of tax to the national kitty. And by way of that, your child can enjoy free SHS. I think it can work to some extent. What we need is to get these ideas and then rework them and see how best it can work for us.
Professor Ite.
Thank you very much. Let me answer the question that the Director General posed first. His question was that previously, when parents were contributing through fee payments, the problems were there. And so taking that away shouldn't be seen as the... Nobody is arguing that the parents' contribution is what caused the problem. We are saying even at that time, there wasn't enough money in the schools. Even when the parents were paying, there wasn't enough money for the schools to run. That's why PTAs and others came in with paying for teacher motivation and all those things. So if the government wants to assist, what the government contribution should be doing is complementing or adding to what was there, not substituting for what was there. You know, as I said, you have 1.1 to 1.3 million coming in. We need not to change anything at all for the schools to run as they were, 3.3. So there's a deficit. That deficit needs to be filled. Parents making contributions is one. And anything else that you want to add to it. Any kind of money. That's why all students contribute. Without all, take a school like Achimota. All students contribute 60% of all the capital expenditure of the school. Parents, PTA, they make the student houses run. Without the contribution of the PTA, the rehabilitation in the houses of the school would not be taking place. So there's a lot that goes in there. When you deny all of these groups the opportunity to make serious, significant contributions, you are basically destroying the system. That's the point we are trying to make over here. You need the government's money, you need the parents' money, you need the private sector, you need all the money, you need donors' money. If we want our children to perform much better than they are doing today. You need at least 4 times the money what we spend in these schools. We need at least 4 times what they spend in these schools. And the government does not have that money. The government does not have it. Let us not pretend that the money is sitting somewhere and it doesn't have it. So we've got to find it. That's why parents must contribute. There was an earlier question about how to incentivize the private sector to make, I think it's a very important thing. The questioner himself also provided some possibilities. Basically, the private sector will be willing if there's an incentive. A fiscal incentive is one, but there may be other incentives through public education. Many of them recognize the fact that today the quality of the students that they are hiring is not good. And so they need to do something about that. It's a matter of engaging them, having a solid discussion about how to improve on the quality of education, and they making contributions which can be offset against whatever taxes they are paying. I think that discussion must take place. But beyond the tax one, I also talked about PPP. How can some of these institutions have equity stakes in some of the schools that we have? You want modern labs. These cost millions of dollars to establish. The parents can't afford that, and the government can't afford it. They may be international organizations, international companies, and so on. They can afford, and they know what good labs look like. So there's no point in expecting our kids to go to pre-sec and do science and then not be able to compete with other kids from Korea and other places because of the lab conditions. That's what must change. When I said the Ghana Education Service was averse to parents contributing, I wasn't making reference to the PTA. I was making reference to parents paying fees. And that the GS has said today, and I've said all the time, that that is against the policy. And I'm saying, let's have a look at that policy. For the purpose of this gathering here today is for us to appraise the whole system, review it. If there's a possibility of the government to consider making parents make a contribution to the fees or the revenues of the schools, I think that should be possible. That should be open for discussion.
Okay. I want to take one last round. I see a lot of hands. What? Good. One there. Where's the other microphone, please? Is there? Is the microphone there with you? The corner there. Okay. And then when you finish, please, I see a lady there behind the cameras, and another lady there. I just want to hear from ladies as well. Yes. Yes, sir. Please, very briefly, in 30 seconds, question or contribution.
All right, thank you very much. Good morning. My name is Evan Sopokujima, the director for His Majesty Senior High School in Dansuman. A quick one. I personally believe that the government of Ghana wants to give Ghanaian children free education. And I think most of us support that idea. But going forward, you could see that Professor Ennis Aite said that parents who can afford should be made to pay. I also support that same view. But I think the problem here is that this free SHS policy is coming from the government, and it's coming from the MPP political party, so it becomes a political issue. So at this point, I want to urge the Minister of Education, Ghana Education Service, and the government of Ghana to accept this point that parents can afford, some parents can afford. So going forward, they should accept the fact that parents who can afford should be made to pay. That's my point. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Let me take, yes, sir.
Yeah, good morning. My name is Gerhard Adanugo. I think that when Mr. Titi Ofei was giving his submission, he put a 3-point agenda initially. He talked about good teachers. He talked about critical thinking, and he talked about problem solving as well. I think that what is lacking in our national fabric today is the critical thinking aspect that I think would lead to problem solving. We don't seem to know how to ask the kind of questions that we should be asking as Ghanaians. Now, the point is this. I was just reading in the graphic Professor Gachi's position on the the initial source of funding for the free SHS. And he thinks that there's nothing wrong in telling Ghanaians that we'll take the money from tax. If we didn't say that then, and we are saying it now, it doesn't hurt anybody. And I think that is the point sometimes our leaders fail to address. How can I go back to tell them, even if that is a solution to the current impasse? The truth is that nothing good comes nice initially. By the end of it, we'll stand to praise you. I mean, a little scenario I want to give is, I was lying in a hospital bed and some years back, and there was this patient by me. In the morning, the nurse was going around giving our medication, and for those of us who know Nivaquine, then the medicine Nivaquine, the anti-malarial drug, you know, he was giving 4 to take, and when he took his cup of water and was about to throw them in his mouth, and the nurse says, no, by doctor's prescription, you're supposed to chew all the 4. And if you know what Nivaquine is, chew 1 alone is hell. 4, but that was the doctor's prescription. In a few days, he was discharged, he was well. It doesn't sound pleasant, but if that is what would help us, then let's do it.
Okay.
I'm coming.
Okay. Unfortunately, I have to go on because we need to wrap up.
No,
other than that,
no, just a minute. Let me make my point.
No, have 10 seconds if you can.
Okay. Now, I think that Professor Ite was talking about the PTA bit of it, and that is where I wanted to land. Mm-hmm. I think that we have not exercised this option. And the school I went to, thankfully, he is a past immediate past chairman, governor of the board. Okay, and the point, the calculations we are making, and today's program is sustaining free education, the sustenance of it. And so if you have, let's say, 14 houses, the old students of us, okay, those of us who are old students, if like 100 people pass through a house every year, and there are 14 houses, that's...
I'm running out of time on this, please. I want you to nail it for me, because I need to, other people are waiting to...
I'll do it in 15 seconds, okay? And you have about 1,400, okay? And then you say everybody pay 1,000 cedis a year. Okay, you're looking at about 1.5 billion then. And so this is part of the issue why I think that if we want to look at the sustainability of it, let's also look at not only the PTA, but let's look at even the old students, because I've not heard it being critically addressed.
Okay, thank you. I think 50 seconds up. Let me hear from the lady there.
My name is Baba. I work with Business and Financial Times. I think with every government policy comes challenges. What people are agitated about is that the challenges with the free senior high school were obvious from the beginning, and they were glaring. And so if government didn't address that and was in a haste to implement it, it just looks like he just wanted to fulfill a political promise. So let's just...
Hello, just gone by the final Stanbic Bank graphic business meeting on education, focusing on financing education and the sustainable options that are available. There was an interesting panel discussion. Definitely will bring you more. But it's time for News Desk, the headlines in a bit.